In the quiet town of Aguas Claras, Minas Gerais, life seemed to follow a serene and predictable rhythm for most of its residents. The narrow streets were adorned with colonial-style houses and lined with ipe trees that during certain times of the year painted the ground in shades of pink and yellow. In this picturesque setting stood Edson Montero, a respected businessman who, at 57, bore the weight of a legacy that extended beyond his luxury hotel chain. Edson was a familiar sight in the town's central square on Sunday mornings, where locals would watch him cross the gazebo on his way to the bakery to pick up his cheese bread and coffee. Despite his methodical routine, his proud demeanor and impeccably tailored suit always caught attention. However, for those who knew him well, it was evident that the spark in his eyes had faded 5 years ago when he lost Clarice, his wife and great love. Clarice was not just his companion, she was the gravitational center of his life. Endowed with a vibrant personality, she had a contagious laugh and a natural talent for transforming any environment with her art. She was a painter, and her works, always filled with color and life, seemed to capture the essence of people and nature around her. When she fell ill unexpectedly, Edson's world crumbled. The mansion they had shared, once filled with canvases, music, and animated conversations, became a silent sanctuary, almost suffocating in its stillness. The pain of Clarice's absence permeated every aspect of Edson's routine. He still kept her studio intact, a room he rarely visited, but that symbolized the presence of something greater, a shared life now interrupted. Yet Edson refused to change anything. The dried paints and scattered brushes seemed to cry out for a hand that would never touch them again. He visited the cemetery weekly, always bringing white roses, Clarice's favorite. Sometimes he would linger for hours, as if the words he murmured at her grave could somehow cross the barrier between life and death. As the years passed, Edson's solitude became evident even to his employees. He was a demanding but fair leader. However, his interactions were brief and tinged with a melancholy that seemed inescapable. "Mr. Edson doesn't smile like he used to," the receptionists at the Montero Palace Hotel, the most prestigious in his chain, would remark. Behind his impeccable facade, Edson waged an internal battle to find purpose. Old friends suggested travel, hobbies, even a new relationship, but he politely declined all suggestions. "My life is where Clarice left it," he would say resignedly. For him, the past was an anchor, and any attempt to move forward seemed like an act of betrayal to the love that had united them. Yet, even amid his grief, there were moments when Edson found himself revisiting fragments of his history with Clarice. The memory of how she loved to gaze at the stars in the backyard, lying on a chaise lounge with a glass of wine in hand, still brought a smile to his face. These memories did not free him, but they also kept him grounded. "She was always my inspiration," he thought, as he gazed out the window of his office. And so Edson lived. Between the pain and longing, he had become a shadow of his former self, yet at the same time, a man carrying a story that few could understand. Little did he know that an unexpected encounter was about to disrupt his routine and unearth secrets that could change his life forever. Between pain and nostalgia, he had become a shadow of who he once was, but at the same time, a man who carried a story that few could comprehend. Little did he know that an unexpected encounter was about to disrupt his routine and unearth secrets that could change his life forever. It was an ordinary afternoon in Aguas Claras, one of those days when the stifling heat of the countryside made even the birds seek refuge in the shade of the trees. Edson Montero, after a morning of exhausting meetings at the main hotel of his chain, decided to use a rideshare app to return home. This had become a recent habit. He enjoyed watching the bustling streets and feeling, even for brief moments, the vibrant life of the city. But that trip would be anything but ordinary. When the car arrived, Edson noticed something unusual. The driver was a young woman. This surprised him, as it was rare to find women driving for rideshare apps in Aguas Claras. There was something different about her, something Edson couldn't quite define at first. As he settled into the back seat, he noticed a name tag hanging from the rearview mirror, and his heart skipped a beat. Agatha Clarice, it read in simple letters, but the impact of those words hit him like a bolt of lightning, piercing the silence that dominated his mind. He blinked several times, convinced that his eyes might be deceiving him. Clarice was a name he rarely heard since the death of his wife, and seeing it there alongside another name as unusual as Agatha felt like a cruel twist of fate. The young woman had deep green eyes and a smile that conveyed a mix of confidence and serenity. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and she wore a simple t-shirt, making no effort to impress. Yet there was something more, a subtle trait that seemed to echo the memories of his deceased wife. "Good afternoon, Mr. Edson," she said politely. He was momentarily confused. How did she know his name? Sensing his bewilderment, Agatha pointed to the app on the phone mounted on the dashboard. "Your name appears here," she explained with a slight smile. The initial silence in the car was uncomfortable. Edson was troubled by the coincidence of the name and couldn't take his eyes off the driver, trying to find some logic in this encounter. After a few minutes, he mustered the courage to start a casual conversation. "Agatha is a beautiful name, and rare too. Clarice, is that a family name?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant, but the tension in his voice was evident. "Thank you. It's the name my adoptive parents chose, but they've always told me that Clarice was part of my name even before the adoption. I don't know much about my biological origins, actually," she replied casually, though with a hint of curiosity. "You seem surprised. Do you know someone with that name?" Edson hesitated. How could he explain that name was an open wound in his heart? "Clarice was the name of my deceased wife," he finally said, choosing his words carefully. "And, interestingly, you have features that remind me of her." Agatha chuckled lightly, downplaying the coincidence. "Life is full of these little twists, isn't it? Sometimes I wonder if I have some special connection to my name. It might sound silly, but I feel like it carries a piece of something I lost." That sentence echoed in Edson's mind. It was as if, unknowingly, Agatha had touched on something profound. He began to observe her more closely, the way she furrowed her brow while changing lanes, the casual manner in which she adjusted the rearview mirror. Everything felt absurdly familiar. When the ride ended, Edson was torn between thanking her and letting it go, or following his instinct to ask her more about herself. Before leaving the car, he looked intently at Agatha and risked one last question. "Have you ever tried to find out more about your biological parents?" "I've thought about it, but it's complicated. I don't have much information, just that I was adopted in Ouro Preto. My adoptive parents have always been wonderful to me, but sometimes I wonder where I really came from," she replied, her tone a mix of resignation and curiosity. The mention of Ouro Preto sparked something in Edson's mind, a vague detail from Clarice's stories that he had never explored. His late wife had lived in that city during her youth. He thanked Agatha for the ride, but his mind was already racing, trying to piece everything together. As he watched the car drive away down the narrow street, Edson felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a mixture of anxiety and hope. He didn't yet know what that encounter meant, but he was certain it was no mere coincidence. The name, the features, the destiny, all seemed part of a puzzle that needed solving. After meeting Agatha, Edson's mind became a labyrinth of restless thoughts. Every detail of their conversation reverberated within him: the name, the city of origin, the familial traits. Was it possible that fate was trying to reveal something to him? He wasn't a man prone to mysticism, but the coincidence was too great to ignore. Back at his mansion, Edson headed to Clarice's studio, a place he avoided due to its emotional weight. The scent of dry paint still lingered in the air, as if Clarice were there, ready to start a new piece. On a table lay old notebooks and photo albums, preserved like relics. He had never had the courage to part with them, but he also rarely revisited them. With trembling fingers, Edson opened one of the albums. There were pictures of Clarice at various stages of life, young and smiling at the beginning of their relationship, pregnant before she suffered the miscarriage they had both longed for, and later, in happy moments at hotels she loved to visit with Edson. One photo in particular caught his eye. It was of Clarice as a teenager in Ouro Preto. On the back of the picture, in her delicate handwriting, she had written, "A piece of who I was." kept in the silence of time. The words, which once sounded poetic, now seemed to hide something deeper. Edson's heart ached. He decided to seek answers from someone who might help him. Donna Eulalia, Clarice's mother. At 82, Eulalia was a woman of strong spirit, but her health was declining. She lived in a simple house surrounded by flowers she tended with care. When she saw Edson arrive, she smiled warmly, but immediately sensed his unease. "You look different, Edson. Something is bothering you?" she asked, in her usual firm yet loving tone. Edson hesitated before replying. "Donna Eulalia, I need to know something about Clarice's past. It's a long story, but I met a young woman who shares her name, and something about her makes me believe there might be a connection to our family." Eulalia fell silent for a moment, as if deciding whether to speak or not. Finally, she sighed deeply and said, "Edson, you deserve to know the truth, but I warn you that it might shake you. Clarice told me, just before marrying you, about a secret she kept for years. When she was young, she became pregnant by a man she met in Ouro Preto. It wasn't a stable relationship, and the circumstances of the time were difficult. Clarice had the baby in secret and, with great sorrow, gave her up for adoption." Edson froze. The revelation hit him like an avalanche. "She had a daughter," he murmured, feeling a mix of shock and sadness. Donna Eulalia continued, tears in her eyes. "She never fully overcame this, Edson. The child's name was Agatha. Clarice chose that name as a way to give her something precious, even though she had to part with her. She never told you because she was afraid of how you would react, how it might change your relationship." Eulalia's words made Edson reflect on the past. He remembered nights when Clarice seemed melancholic, lost in thought. He now wondered if those were the times when the weight of her secret haunted her. Determined to dig deeper, Edson decided to hire a private investigator. He wanted concrete answers, facts that could confirm or dispel his suspicions. The investigation took days, but the investigator finally returned with a lead. Agatha, the driver he had crossed paths with, worked as a barista at a cafe in downtown Aguas Claras. The investigator also brought an additional detail. Agatha was adopted in Ouro Preto exactly during the period when Clarice would have given birth. Moreover, the scant information available about her biological parents matched the accounts of Donna Eulalia. It was practically impossible to ignore the possibility. Sitting in his study, Edson held the report in his hands. He felt a mix of anxiety and hope, but also fear. Fear that all of this was just a coincidence, and that in the end, he was merely clinging to something to fill the void left by Clarice. Still, he knew he couldn't leave this story unfinished. In the distance, the wall clock ticked away, marking the passage of time, but for Edson, that moment felt eternal. He decided he needed to speak with Agatha again, to share what he had discovered. The past he had tried so hard to protect was finally resurfacing, but instead of bringing only pain, he felt that this truth could be a bridge to something new, something that might give meaning to what Clarice had left behind. The cafe where Agatha worked was on a charming corner in downtown Aguas Claras, with tables set beneath leafy trees and exposed brick walls adorned with local artists' paintings. Edson hesitated in front of the door, hands trembling and a weight in his chest that he hadn't felt since the day he learned he would lose Clarice. Entering that place meant opening a chapter he still didn't know how to write, but something inside him urged him on. Perhaps it was the unwavering love for Clarice, or the sudden feeling that, in some way, she was guiding him. Agatha was behind the counter, distracted, working the milk frother for a cappuccino. She seemed at ease in that environment, interacting with customers with a smile that Edson now recognized as familiar. He stood still for a few seconds, watching her as a whirlwind of emotions swept over him. She had the spontaneous and warm demeanor of Clarice, but with a unique strength that made her her own person. "Agatha," Edson called in a low but firm tone. She looked up, surprised to recognize him. "Mr. Edson, what a coincidence to see you here," she said with a friendly smile. "Did you come to try our coffee? It's the best in town, I promise." Edson smiled back, but his heart raced. He knew there was no way to approach the subject casually. "Actually, I came here because I need to talk to you. It's something important." Agatha frowned. intrigued, but she noticed the seriousness on his face. "Sure. Can we talk after my shift? It will be more comfortable." "I'll wait," Edson replied, sitting at a nearby table by the window, watching the cafe's bustling activity. Time seemed to drag on as he mentally organized everything he needed to say. He knew he couldn't just dump the information on her, but he also didn't want to risk coming off as evasive. When Agatha finally joined him, bringing 2 coffees, Edson took a deep breath. "Agatha, since the day we met, something has been nagging at me. It might sound strange, but I feel like fate brought us together." She tilted her head, curious but unsure where he was going. "What do you mean?" "I discovered some things about your past, about your adoption, and they connect directly to my wife. Clarice's story," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Clarice had a daughter before we got married, in Uro Preto, a girl she had to give up for adoption because of the difficult circumstances. That girl's name was Agatha." Agatha blinked several times, processing what he was saying. The coffee in her cup trembled slightly, and she set it down on the table. "Are you saying that I could be your wife's daughter?" "Yes," Edson replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not here to create false hopes, but there are so many coincidences that I needed to talk to you. Clarice never forgot the daughter she lost, and when I learned your name, your origins, I couldn't ignore it." Agatha fell silent for a moment, clearly processing what she had just heard. "I've always wondered about my biological family, but I never imagined something like this. My adoptive mother said I was given up with love, but there was always a piece of the story that no one could fill. I brought something that might help you understand," Edson said, pulling out a photograph of a teenage Clarice in Uro Preto from the folder he carried. "This is Clarice, and you, well, the resemblance is undeniable." Agatha took the photo carefully, as if holding something fragile. Tears filled her eyes as she studied the image. "She was beautiful," she murmured. "And there's something about her that I can't explain. It's like I recognize her." The conversation unfolded with Edson sharing more details about Clarice, how she loved to paint, her outlook on life, and the little gestures that made her unique. As he spoke, Agatha seemed to absorb every word, like someone finally finding pieces of a puzzle they hadn't realized was incomplete. "I don't want to invade your life or force you into anything," Edson concluded, his voice thick with emotion. "But if you're willing, I think we can try to understand together what all of this means. Clarice left so much of herself behind, and maybe you can learn more about her." Agatha took a deep breath, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "I want to know more. I want to understand my story, my mother, and if you're right, then maybe I can finally fill the void I've always felt." From that moment on, they embarked on a journey of reconnection. Edson showed Agatha Clarice's diaries, filled with thoughts and feelings she had never dared to share with anyone. One of the diaries spoke of Agatha, of how Clarice hoped her daughter, wherever she was, would find happiness. Clarice's words felt like a warm embrace for Agatha, who spent hours reading, crying, and discovering a new part of herself. As time went on, the relationship between Edson and Agatha began to blossom. It wasn't just the search for answers that united them, but also the desire to honor Clarice's memory and transform their pain into something beautiful. The past, once a burden, now became a thread of hope and new beginnings. The days that followed the reunion between Edson and Agatha were a whirlwind of intense emotions and fresh starts. Despite the storm of information, one thing was clear to both of them. The connection they had established transcended words. It was as if Clarice's love was weaving a new bond between them, mending the gaps left by years of unanswered questions. For the first time in a long time, Edson felt a spark of purpose. Agatha's presence brought a breath of fresh air to his routine. She was curious, energetic, and without realizing it, challenged Edson to step out of his comfort zone. He, in turn, became a kind of guide for Agatha, showing her pieces of a past she had never known existed. One afternoon, while exploring Clarice's studio, Agatha discovered an old diary hidden beneath a pile of unfinished canvases. "Can I open it?" she asked, holding the object as if it were a treasure. Edson nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity. The pages were filled with notes about dreams and fears, but what caught Agatha's attention was a letter addressed to "My Agatha." Clarice's delicate handwriting overflowed with love and regret. The letter read, "My dear Agatha, if you ever read these words, I hope you know that there was never a day when I didn't think about you. Leaving you was the hardest decision of my life, made with love, and the hope that you would have a better life. If fate unites us again, I want you to know that the love I have for you is eternal, even if our lives have taken different paths." Agatha couldn't hold back her tears. "She thought about me, even after everything," she murmured, her voice choked. For Edson, that moment was a milestone. For the first time, he saw in Agatha the strength of Clarice, but also something unique, the resilience of someone seeking to rediscover herself. As days passed, their bond deepened. Edson began to share stories he had never told anyone, like the day he and Clarice decided to open their first hotel together, a small chalet in Tiradentes, which became the starting point for the large network he managed today. Agatha, in turn, began to reveal her own passions, including her inclination towards art, something she had never fully explored. One day, while visiting the garden of the mansion, Edson suggested something that would change both their trajectories. "What if we opened an art gallery in honor of Clarice? She always wanted her art to touch people, and you could manage the space. It would be a way to continue her legacy." Agatha fell silent, absorbing the idea. "I think it would be amazing, and in a way, it would be like having her here with us through the works she left behind." The gallery project began to take shape quickly. Edson transformed an old party hall into a vibrant space filled with Clarice's works and new pieces that Agatha began to create. Inspired by her mother's colors and techniques, she dove headfirst into art, finding a form of expression and healing. The gallery's opening was an event that united the town of Aguas Claras. Friends, family, and former colleagues of Clarice attended, moved by the idea that her legacy still lived on. During the opening speech, Edson said something that touched everyone present. Clarice believed in the power of love and art to transform lives. Today, I see that happening before my eyes. This gallery is not just a space for exhibitions, but a symbol of reconnection, hope, and new beginnings. Agatha, her eyes misty, added, "I always felt like something was missing in my life, and now I realize it was her. Even without having known her, I feel that Clarice is present in every brushstroke, in every color. This space is as much hers as it is mine." Their journey was not without challenges. There were moments of doubt and tension, especially when Agatha questioned her place in the story of Clarice and Edson. But the bond they were building was unbreakable. Edson, who had spent years trapped in a routine of loneliness, found in Agatha a reason to move forward. And Agatha discovered in Edson a father figure she had always lacked. As time went on, the gallery became a meeting point for artists and art lovers in Aguas Claras, but more than that, it represented the strength of love that transcends generations. Clarice, even in her absence, continued to guide the steps of Edson and Agatha, uniting them on a journey of transformation and discovery. The connection between Edson and Agatha went beyond names and familial traits. It was a journey of identity, a rediscovery of what it means to belong to something greater. For Agatha, every conversation with Edson brought pieces of a puzzle that had seemed impossible to assemble before. For Edson, his relationship with Agatha was an opportunity to rediscover Clarice's love in a new form, something he had never imagined was possible. At the heart of this reconnection was the theme of identity. Agatha, raised by loving adoptive parents, had always felt an inexplicable void, as if there were a part of her story that remained inaccessible. Since childhood, she had been fascinated by family trees, trying to trace imaginary lines that explained who she was. She always wondered if her passion for art came from an innate instinct or something larger. The answer was finally beginning to reveal itself. Edson decided to show Agatha more about Clarice's past, inviting her to spend an afternoon exploring her biological mother's old belongings. In the mansion's basement, among wooden boxes and furniture covered with sheets, was the chest chest that Clarice always referred to as her memory vault. Inside there were sketchbooks, photographs, and even love notes that Clarice and Edson exchanged during the early years of their marriage. One of the most impactful discoveries for Agatha was a sketch of a face that looked remarkably like hers. "She drew me even without knowing me?" Agatha asked, her voice choked with emotion. "She knew you, Agatha, in her heart. Clarice always felt a connection to you, even from afar. This drawing, she made it long before she ever met you. Perhaps it was her way of keeping you close, even in thought," Edson explained, tears in his eyes. Agatha began to notice traits of herself in Clarice's story. The passion for art, the determined spirit, the way she saw beauty in the small details of everyday life. With each discovery, Agatha felt less lost and more connected to her roots. She started to see her adoptive mother and Clarice not as conflicting figures, but as two complementary parts of who she was. For Edson, he rediscovered the meaning of family. After Clarice's death, he believed his life had lost its luster. However, watching Agatha explore the treasures of the past, he realized that her presence was like a new flame. Agatha was not just a reminder of Clarice, but also a unique force that brought energy and hope back into his life. One night, as they walked through the garden lit by starlight, Agatha shared a thought that had been maturing in her heart. "I've always been afraid of not being enough for anyone, not for my adoptive parents, nor for myself. But discovering my mother, about Clarice, made me realize that my identity doesn't have to be fixed. I can be everything they taught me to be together." Edson smiled, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. "You are more than enough, Agatha. You are the living proof of Clarice's love, and now of our ability to rebuild what seemed lost." The bond between them was not just about sharing a common past, but also about building a future together. Edson began to teach Agatha about the business world, while she encouraged him to explore art and open his mind to new possibilities. A defining moment occurred when Agatha discovered an unfinished painting by Clarice. "Let me finish it," she requested. Edson hesitated, but knew that this was Agatha's way of connecting even more deeply with her mother. When the painting was completed, it resembled a collaborative work. Clarice's bold, emotional brushstrokes perfectly blended with Agatha's more delicate, experimental style. They decided to showcase the piece as a highlight in the gallery, calling it Shared Legacy. The gallery became more than just an exhibition space. It turned into a community gathering place where stories of identity and family were celebrated. During events, Agatha began to share her journey, inspiring others who were also searching for answers about their past. Edson, always by her side, became a pillar of support, but also someone who learned every day from the strength and resilience of the young woman. The theme of identity became the guiding thread of this new stage. It was not just about discovering who Clarice was or what role Agatha played in that story. It was about how love, resilience, and human connections have the power to transform lives, rewriting what seemed to be an ending into a new beginning. The art gallery, inaugurated as a tribute to Clarice, soon became more than a space for exhibitions. It was a sanctuary of memories and a reconnection point for Edson and Agatha. Art, once merely Clarice's passion, now flowed as a living bond between mother, daughter, and the man who loved them both. Agatha found refuge in her biological mother's studio. It was as if every brushstroke left by Clarice on the canvases, every forgotten sketch, and every mix of colors contained a piece of a conversation they never had. Inspired by this, Agatha began creating her own artworks. At first, they were timid, almost as if she didn't want to invade the sacred space of Clarice. But with Edson's encouragement, her confidence grew. "Don't worry about what others will think, Agatha. Just let what you feel take form on the canvas," he said, watching her with a pride he hadn't felt in a long time. Agatha began to incorporate elements from Clarice's works into her paintings. She used the same vibrant colors, but added her own modern touches, creating something that felt like an artistic conversation between generations. In one of her most notable pieces, titled Reunion, Agatha depicted a young woman walking towards a figure with her back turned, surrounded by colors blending like memories meeting in the present. When the painting was exhibited in the gallery, visitors were moved by the depth and symbolism of the work. Edson, in turn, found in the gallery a way to reconnect not only with Clarice, but with a part of himself he had lost. He became Agatha's biggest supporter, helping her plan exhibitions and promoting events that celebrated the emerging talent of local artists. The gallery began to gain fame, attracting visitors from other cities. It was as if the space carried a special energy, something that stemmed from the story that permeated it. One day, while organizing Clarice's old files, Agatha found a series of letters that her mother never sent. In them, Clarice wrote about her relationship with art and how it helped her cope with her deepest emotions. "Painting is my way of transforming pain into beauty," one of the letters said. Agatha felt as if those words were meant for her. Inspired, she decided to create a series of paintings titled Letters to Agatha, based on the emotions she felt while reading her mother's writings. The works from that series were displayed on a special night at the gallery, drawing hundreds of visitors. Agatha spoke to the audience, with Edson by her side. "These paintings are my way of reconnecting with a mother I never knew in life, but who, in a way, has always been with me. Her art wasn't just her passion, it was her way of leaving a legacy, and it's this legacy that I want to share with all of you." The reaction was overwhelming. People in the audience shared their own stories of grief, reconnection, and overcoming challenges. An elderly woman, tears in her eyes, said to Agatha, "You transformed your pain into something beautiful. That is a gift." Edson watched it all with an emotional smile. He knew that Clarice would be proud, not only of Agatha's talent, but also of the impact she was having on the lives of those around her. In addition to painting, Agatha began to explore other artistic mediums. Inspired by old photographs of Clarice, she decided to experiment with photography, creating compositions that blended real images with artistic interventions. One of her most impactful pieces was a montage of an old photo of Clarice, combined with abstract elements symbolizing the connection between past and present. When the piece was exhibited, Edson was left speechless. He saw not only Clarice in that image, but also Agatha's strength as an artist. The gallery was not just a space for artwork, it became a place of healing and transformation. Edson began to host school groups, organizing guided visits so that children could learn about the importance of art as a form of expression. Inspired by this initiative, Agatha started offering free workshops for young, emerging artists, especially those who lacked the resources to invest in their passion. Gradually, the gallery began to attract national attention. An art critic from São Paulo visited the space and wrote, "The Aguas Claras Gallery is not just a tribute to Clarice Monteiro, but a reminder of how love and art can transcend time, connecting people and inspiring generations." However, for Edson and Agatha, the greatest reward was not the gallery's success, but what it represented for them. One evening, as they gazed at the painting Shared Legacy, Edson said, "Clarice gave us more than memories. She gave us a reason to move forward. And now, we are creating something that goes far beyond ourselves." Agatha smiled, holding his hand. "I never knew her, but I feel that she is here, in every color, in every detail, and that makes me believe that even in loss, we can find something precious." At that moment, it became clear to both of them that art was not just a means of expression, it was a catalyst for healing, a bridge that connected them to the past and guided them toward a future full of possibilities. A year after the reunion that changed their lives, Edson and Agatha found themselves in a place they had never imagined. The art gallery, now renowned as Clarice Monteiro Space, had become a cultural icon in Aguas Claras. But more important than the project's success was what it represented, a place where memories, love, and hope intertwined, transforming not only their lives, but also the lives of many others. Edson, who had once lived enclosed in his grief, seemed reborn. At 58, he felt lighter, more human. The methodical routine that once defined him was replaced by days filled with meaning. He discovered the joy of teaching Agatha the secrets of business and the delight of watching her flourish not only as an artist, but also as someone capable of inspiring others. On a sunny morning, as they walked through the Parque das Aguas, a place Clarice loved, Edson shared a thought that had been maturing in his mind. You know, Agatha, when Clarice passed away, I thought my life had lost its purpose. But now I realize that her love lives on through you and through what we are building. And that makes me believe that nothing is ever truly lost. Agatha smiled, holding his arm. I used to think I was incomplete. I always felt like something was missing to define me. But now, looking at everything we've built here, I realize my journey has been a gift. Every step brought me to this moment, to this place, where I can honor my biological mother's memory, while also celebrating the parents who raised me. Art is not just an expression, it's a bridge. And this gallery is proof that love, even after loss and challenges, can transform lives. Edson, with tears in his eyes, added, Clarice always believed that love knew no bounds, that it could transform and grow, even in the most improbable situations. Today, as I look at everything Agatha has achieved, I know she was right. Love unites us, strengthens us, and gives us the chance to create something greater than ourselves. The event was a success, but the most profound impact lay in the lives they had touched. Many visitors shared stories of how the gallery had inspired their own journeys of overcoming and reconnecting. A young artist recounted how Agatha's workshops had given him the courage to showcase his work for the first time. A single mother shared how Edson's example of resilience had helped her believe in a better future for her children. That night, as they closed the gallery, Edson and Agatha sat in the garden illuminated by stars. It feels like she's here, doesn't it? Agatha remarked, gazing at the sky. Somehow I feel like Clarice is smiling. She is, Edson replied with a serene smile. And I think we've finally found the home we've been searching for. The journey of Edson and Agatha was not just a reconciliation with the past, but a testament to how love, hope, and art have the power to transform even the deepest scars into something beautiful and meaningful. In that moment, looking toward the horizon, they both felt they were exactly where they were meant to be, together, building a legacy of love and resilience that would endure long beyond their lives.